Hi there, this is Al24 News, live from Algiers. Coming up next in our news program. Turning the joy to horror, a car has plowed through a Christmas parade in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, killing 5 and injuring at least 40 people plus. In our news file, we will be discussing the latest updates in Sudan regarding the 14-point deal between Hamdok and the military signed in the presidential palace in Khartoum. And finally, the head of the Libyan interim government, Abdelhamid Dbeiba, presented his candidacy papers for the presidential elections, scheduled for the end of next month to be the last prominent candidate for the elections. Hello again and welcome. First in our top stories, according to the city of Waukesha, a car has plowed through a Christmas parade in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, killing 5 and injuring at least 40 people, turning their joy to horror. Nabil Khazini reports.
A tragedy in Waukesha, Wisconsin, after at least 5 people were dead and more than 40 were injured when a car crashed into a parade. Social media footage showed the vehicle breaking through barriers and speeding into the road where the Christmas parade was taking place. Shocked by the incident, people, including families and children, fled for their lives as the car sped off, knocking down dozens of people. Officials in Waukesha warned that the number of fatalities and injuries could change as additional information is collected.
The City of Waukesha Fire Department and its partners in Mavis transported a total of 11 adults and 12 pediatric patients to 6 area hospitals. We do not have any specifics on the injuries at this time. All of the patients were transported. There were some fatalities. We do not have any detailed information on the fatalities at this time.
Police officer had shot at the SUV in an unsuccessful bid to stop the vehicle as it crashed through street barriers. Officers say they have not discounted terrorism as a motive, but they also believe to be looking into the possibility the suspect was fleeing an earlier knife incident when he reached the parade route.
It's unknown at this time whether the incident has any nexus to terrorism. To the families involved, you are in Waukesha Police Department thoughts and prayers. To the Waukesha community, the scene is now safe and secure.
A picture captured later at an unknown location showed what appeared to be the vehicle involved backed on to a driveway with the hood badly dented and bent up. It is unclear how the vehicle came to be there, and police have not revealed exactly how the suspect was arrested.
The first round of Chilean vote resulted well for the far-right former legislator José Antonio Cast on Sunday after he finished on top ahead of the leftist lawmaker and former protest leader Gabriel Boric. The candidates will meet next month, December the 19th, in Chile's presidential runoff. Elections will end the fatigue and fear that the Chileans lived through the past 2 years, as Cast said that the elections are a choice between liberty and communism. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro congratulated the United Socialist Party for winning the post of regional presidents in 20 states beside the capital Caracas in the local elections that took place in Venezuela on Sunday. Hossein Berkani reports.
President Nicolas Maduro scored a landslide victory in the local elections on Sunday, according to what the National Electoral Council announced. Shortly after the first results were published, President Nicolas Maduro celebrated the triumph.
As a result of the efforts of the 24 federal regions of our country and the great national poll, the revolutionary forces won 21 positions, including in the capital of Venezuela, Caracas, and this is 21 out of 24 regions, which is the result of hard work, a result that sheds light on the truth.
The power camp won 20 out of 23 governorships and the mayor of Caracas in the face of the divided opposition that participated for the first time in a vote since 2017. after it had previously boycotted the presidential and legislative elections. Information from the Venezuelan National Electoral Council announced these results after 90% of the votes were counted, while the participation rate in the election was 41%. As for the Venezuelan opposition, it won according to the preliminary results the local elections in 3 states, expressing reservation and considering that the late closing of polling stations may have led to fraud. These elections constitute a victory for the Venezuelan regime, which is seeking to lift sanctions imposed on it after the re-election of Nicolas Maduro as president of Venezuela in 2018, which was not recognized by part of the international community.
Europe descended into a third day of violent carnage on Sunday as tens of thousands of people in Belgium took to the streets to protest against the return of strict lockdown rules aimed at curbing a rise in COVID infections. Zahra Farjani.
Europe's protests against COVID-19 curbs spread to Brussels on Sunday when tens of thousands of demonstrators marched through the city centre. The protest came just hours after Germany followed Austria's example in making vaccination compulsory, with ministers admitting that the move is unavoidable amid the 4th wave of the pandemic, which is crippling the country's hospitals. Many among the estimated 35,000 people at the rally had already left for home when the demonstration descended into violence. Police made more than 40 arrests after several shops were broken into, and videos on social media showed barricades on fire and police cars badly damaged. Belgium has one of the highest vaccination rates in Europe. However, it is reimposing restrictions as cases soar. The country's most vaccinated province, West Flanders, has one of the highest infection rates in the country. Last week, the government expanded work-from-home rules and strengthened restrictions on the unvaccinated.
Austria has returned to a full national lockdown as protests against new restrictions amid a curbing COVID-19 infections spread across Europe. From midnight, Austrians have been asked to work from home and non-essential shops have been closed. Let's follow this report.
Austrian government succeeded relatively to reconfine its population in a desperate try to decrease the spiraling number of COVID-19 cases in the country. This action took place starting from Monday, as citizens are under the obligation of staying home with severe restrictions by the forces, which doesn't permit the people to go out except for necessary activities, including shopping for groceries or going to the doctor. This lockdown was imposed as the average number of deaths is hiking, and hospitals warned that their intensive care units are reaching capacity. The quarantine will last 10 days, with the possibility of extension that can reach 20 days. Austrian Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg announced last week that there would be a mandate for vaccination. However, he didn't give any further explanation on how the mandate will work, but the government stated that the citizens who do not abide by the vaccination rules would face fines. The rate of infections in Austria is rising very rapidly, and vaccination rates are insufficient for the Western European nation to hold off the winter wave. However, the country witnessed fierce protest in the city of Vienna in refusal of the vaccination on Saturday.
The pandemic situation in Europe is worsening after the last decisions of governments on new restrictions for the unvaccinated. This part of citizens showed their wrath and refusal over the limitations as many protests erupted in different parts of the continent. Ayadi Usama with the details.
At a time when Europe is expected to embrace holiday festivities, the continent has become the epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic, as the number of cases soared to a record rate. After 2 years of severe restrictions on the European nation, the infection spiked again at a point that the population is split into 2 parts, vaccinated and non-vaccinated citizens. Europe's healthcare systems have recently limited choices for unvaccinated people in the hope of reducing case rate, and some governments went further, as Austria imposed vaccination on citizens, and many other European governments are heading to the same decision, including Slovakia, Germany, and Greece. The world has been through similar mandatory vaccinations for numerous times in human history. However, nations this time have made it more difficult and challenging for governments, and showed clearly their refusal to the new state limitations. Tens of thousands of protesters gathered in rage in various regions of Europe, including Vienna in Austria, Italy, Croatia, Northern Ireland, and the Netherlands for refusing the partial lockdown restrictions on Saturday. Protesters, including riot groups and freedom parties, threw bottles and cans on police officers, who then used pepper spray to disperse the furious crowds. In some regions, riots went more violent, as some protesters blocked the roads and set cars on fire. Schallenberg apologized to all vaccinated people, explaining that they had to suffer under the new restrictions and that is not the fairest decision, while some riot activists stated that individual rights are being trampled. COVID-19 cases are in continual soar, but the new restrictions are pitting the people against the people, and who knows what the next step for all parts will be, as lives matter and individual rights should be taken into consideration.
Still with the same file, but this time in Africa, though Africa currently has fewer cases of COVID-19 than Europe, experts fear there will be more waves, as only about 7% of the continent's 1.3 billion inhabitants are fully vaccinated. Most African countries depend on vaccine doses from abroad, even if there are efforts to build up local production centers. But as the number of cases rises in Europe, supplies to Africa will likely suffer. Germany, for example, has already made a decision to retain vaccine doses that were destined for poorer countries. Aid officials said that 2 people among a group of 17 U.S.-Canadian missionaries kidnapped by an armed gang in Haiti last month have been released. The abduction of the missionaries and their family members, including children, was reported on the 16th of October. They were returning from a visit to an orphanage when the bus they were traveling in was seized by gang members on a main road in the town of Gathier, east of the capital, Port-au-Prince. All of those abducted at the time, 5 men, 7 women, and 5 children are U.S. citizens, except one who is a Canadian national. The gang reported to be behind the kidnappings, which goes by the name of 400 Mazuru, later demanded a ransom of $1 million for each of the 17 people being held. A summit between China and the ASEAN nations was held virtually without a representative from Myanmar. The latter had earlier set out of the previous ASEAN summits after its members failed to come to a consensus on allowing representation from the military-run State Administration Council. Zara Farjani reports.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday made a rare appearance in a special online summit with leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, emphasizing Beijing's strong commitment to the bloc and promising to buy billions of dollars worth of ASEAN farm products. ASEAN sees China as the key influence to help address the ongoing crisis in Myanmar after the military takeover in February. However, Monday's summit underscored the difficulty of making progress. According to Malaysian Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah, Myanmar pulled out of the meeting at the 11th hour.
All 9 Asian countries have agreed with China's ambassador to Beijing to be representatives for Myanmar in this morning's session. However, this morning's sessions didn't get any resolutions.
Beijing has suggested that Myanmar's ambassador to China could represent the military regime. Saifuddin told reporters that the bloc had agreed to this because ASEAN wanted to maintain the position of Myanmar in the grouping, and it was the understanding until late last night.
An empty chair. But at least there was some kind of consensus as to who would represent Myanmar. At least there was a name. So this is, to my mind, an improvement than what we have had at the ASEAN summit. There we don't even have a name.
Myanmar joined ASEAN in 1997 under a previous military regime. The members of the summit said that Myanmar is an integral part of the ASEAN family and their membership has not been questioned.
And to our news file, the Sudanese Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok reached an agreement that includes the latter's return to the presidency of the Sudanese government and the release of civilian leaders detained since the military coup last month. Zahra Farjani on what followed.
In developments that may change the Sudanese scene, a crucial meeting took place between the president of the Sudanese Sovereignty Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the ousted Prime Minister, Abdullah Hamdok, during which they reached an agreement to resolve the current political crisis. According to media reports, the United National Initiative in Sudan announced the approval of Abdullah Hamdouk's return as Prime Minister during the transitional period, in parallel with calls for demonstrations in rejection of the decisions previously taken by the Sudanese Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The agreement, according to the statement of the initiative, which includes academics, journalists, and politicians, includes the release of all political detainees, the completion of consultations with political forces, with the exception of the National Congress Party, in addition to continuing the procedures for constitutional, legal, and political consensus that govern the transitional period. This comes at a time when the Central Council of the Forces of Freedom and Change announced its adherence to reject negotiations and partnership with those it described as revolutionaries. The Sudanese Professionals Association, which played an essential role during the uprising that led to the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in April 2019, also asked the Sudanese to continue pressing for the return of the city, calling for a number of gatherings throughout the week, including a massive million demonstration on Sunday.
Complications in Sudan is still in its height as the Sudanese Prime Minister was reinstated by the army on Sunday. The act faced fierce reaction of the people who took to the street of Al Khartoum to express their rage for refusing any military interference in any deal. The reinstated Prime Minister promised that he would release all political detainees. Abdullah Hamdouk spent around a month in house arrest after the coup d'etat held by key pro-democracy group, which deployed dozens of white protests. The deal was signed and cast on the Sudanese state TV. However, the act doesn't reveal how far the reaction of the people would go and how would the army react to it. And to talk about the latest insights that are quickly taking place in Sudan, I'm joined live by Badis Khnisa, political and foreign affairs analyst, who joins us live from Paris. Well, first, Badis, can you explain to us the agreement between al-Burhan and Hamdouk? What is it simply about?
First of all, good afternoon, and thank you for invitation. Listen, to summarize, this, what I call a new deal, is coming, or to be more accurate, following the previous ones, the constitution documents and also the Juba agreement signed 2 years ago in order to launch what we call the transitional period, democratic period. I would say that this new settlement or the new agreement includes some specifications like a preliminary commitments should be implemented prior to any actions or common actions between the two sides. For instance, the political and leader detainees released, also to relaunch or restore the period of transitional process, and also reinstate, as you mentioned, Al-Hamdouk as prime minister in order to be in charge of forming a new government, a new, according to their words, technocrat government to be in charge of handling the next transitional period once again. A new settlement, despite, I would say, the civilian sides, opposition, the civilian coalition, turn away, I would say, from such involvement that they consider as a high treason.
And in a couple of words, Mr. Badis, why is this agreement between al-Burhan and Hamdouk is considered as treason and support to the coup, as Sudanese Professionals Association, in addition to other political organizations, including Forces of Freedom and Change, are put in it?
Frankly speaking, since now I think 2 years of transition period, we can easily draw lessons as a feedback. We can easily make some lessons learned. The first lesson learned, in my opinion, is, of course, I would say this sensitive cohabitation between the two sides, the civilian side and the military side. It's a kind of smoke screen, I would say, and today we are facing the risks. The risk and the consequence. The second lesson learned, of course, is, I would say, the assessment of this period of past 2 years of transition, which is, to be honest, a very poor result as I would say, achievements. In front of that, we have a war between the two sides, civilian and the military. And the third lesson learned, is after, as you mentioned, the coup, after the putsch, after the political leader jail. I think that the both sides have reached what I call a point of non-return in their relationships, which is already weak since I think a long month, since 2 years.
And after all, and just to wrap up, do you think that this step is going to calm down the anger of Sudanese who are still protesting in the streets?
Listen, honestly, it's an additional step, I would say, but it's up to the Sudanese citizens and Sudanese people to assess and to find what is right, what is wrong for themselves. But at the meantime, I think that we have to mention that the dialogue is the key point in any conflicts or any wars. So the dialogue should be implemented as soon as possible, but the dialogue with some conditions. I would say that the relationships between the both sides should be respectful, should be at the same level in terms of decisions, in terms of action plans, in terms of drawing the roadmap, the common roadmap. And the roadmap, by the way, should be also totally in line with the citizens, with the Sudanese people wills and goals and achievements. Finally, and I deeply really believe that the success of the next, because it's the second period of transition, democratic transition, should be, I would say, closely related to the major actors, the Sudanese major actors' capacity to build up maybe a transition, independent transition, without any foreign or external interference, and I mean with their own action plan and roadmap decided with the full actors and especially the people.
Thank you so much. Badiz Khanisa, political and foreign affairs analyst. You joined us live.
I would say some point, if you allow me.
Yes, please go ahead.
Because I have a cut, in fact,
yes.
That's why. I would say, but last not least, the situation actually in Sudan is basically the consequence of what I call the imperialist states strategy in the region or in the area. We still remind Darfur, we still remind the Sudan division between the north and south, between Muslim in the north and Christian in the south, between misery in the north and oil and gas in the south. And also, just maybe I advise everybody to maybe keep in our mind, at least in the corner of our mind, a fact that Sudanese state maybe a few months ago in January 2021 has approved what we call the Abraham agreements with the Zionist entity, and in other words, I would say that maybe to sum up, the next government, Sudanese government, should work hand in hand.
We might come to this
independent way.
Thank you. We might cover this in our upcoming editions. Thank you so much, Badiz Khanisa, political and foreign affairs analyst. You joined us live from Paris via Skype. And now to Libya. The head of the Libyan interim government, Abdelhamid Dbeiba, presented his candidacy papers for the presidential elections, scheduled for the end of next month to be the last prominent candidate for the elections. Dbeiba's move was expected after he finally submitted his and his family's financial disclosure to the Anti-Corruption Commission, a procedure that precedes submitting the candidacy file to the Electoral Commission. And now for more about Middle East news, let's follow this report by Marwa Bilaibar.
protests which gathered thousands of Tunisians near parliament in the capital, demanding reinstatement of the assembly. Tunisia's President Kais Saied told the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken that his country was preparing to come out from its exceptional situation, as the U.S. Secretary of State encouraged him to make reforms to respond to Tunisians' hopes for democratic progress, said Sunday, almost 4 months after a shock power grab by Kais Saied. With the Saudi State News Agency reporting that the Saudi-led coalition attacked 13 targets in Yemen, Houthi fighters said on Saturday that they fired 14 drones at several Saudi cities, including at Saudi Aramco facilities in Jeddah. The Saudi-led coalition fighting the Iran-backed Houthi movement in Yemen said it detected indications of imminent danger to navigation and global trade south of the Red Sea. Saudi state media reported early on Monday during a military operation against the group. After the unknown cause of blast happened in Beirut, Lebanon, letters sent by the Beirut Bar Association to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres for information to help the official investigations into the Beirut port explosion, which killed 219 people in August last year, have gone unanswered, according to the organization that represents over 2,000 survivors and victims' families.
And now to some exciting news for all Beatles fans. Some months before their separation, the Beatles spent weeks working on a new project initiated by Paul McCartney, filming and recording rehearsals. Never seen before footage in a long-awaited miniseries. The details in what follow.
1, 2, 3, 4. Go on, Al.
What? Yes, they are the Beatles, a group of rock and roll musicians who loved working together. Rock gods who are extraordinary to see. Good news for all the Beatles fans. A few months before their separation, the Beatles spent several weeks together on a new project initiated by Paul McCartney, filming and recording rehearsals to play live like a real rock and roll band.
But he knew it couldn't last. Jojo left his home in Tucson, Arizona, for some California grass.
These rehearsals will give rise to the album Get Back, the group's penultimate album, before Abbey Road a few months later.
Where we're working on our new movie, The Beatles Get Back. Now, this film was due to be finished around about now, but like the rest of the world, it's been affected by the COVID pandemic. And the only good thing, really, is that we're editing the movie in New Zealand. And now that our country has largely stamped out the virus, we were able to come back into the cutting room and carry on with the editing that we're doing.
And the concert does take place clandestinely, on the roof of their record company in the heart of London. A rock and roll attitude that has influenced all of pop music, as Noel Gallagher, singer of the group Oasis, confirmed.
And finally, the Secretary General of the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy, Hassan Al-Thawadi, affirmed that Qatar is living a historical moment and is moving forward on the road to hosting an incomparable version of the World Cup 2022.
In a special event set by the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy in collaboration with FIFA, the countdown clock for Qatar 2022 World Cup was unveiled on the Doha Corniche yesterday evening. A number of celebrities, guests, FIFA experts, football legends and Qatar Legacy Program ambassadors were present at the ceremony. Al-Thawadi expressed his delight at the presentation of the Qatar 2022 World Cup countdown clock, noting that only 1 year remains till the expected World Tournament kicks off.
This is a unique opportunity for Qatar, for the Gulf, for the Arab world to show to the world that some of the prejudice that exists towards this part of the world is wrong. It's simply prejudice is wrong, that people are welcomed here.
And now let's have a look again to the main headlines. Turning their joy to horror, a car has plowed through a Christmas parade in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, killing 5 and injuring at least 40 people. In our news file, we discuss the latest updates in Sudan regarding the 14-point deal between Hamdouk and the military signed in the presidential palace in Khartoum. And the head of the Libyan interim government, Abdelhamid Dbeiba, presented his candidacy papers for the presidential elections, scheduled for the end of the month, of next month, to be the last prominent candidate for the elections. That's all for this half hour. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.